We're a couple minutes past the hour, so why don't we jump in, Risa? Does that sound great?
Sure, sounds good. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us here today for what I think is a really special webinar. As we are walking into the third year of the third COVID school year, I want to give kudos to Morgan, who really brought to the forefront on our team the thought that perhaps communications professionals and school professionals might need something a little different this year as they walked into this third school year with COVID. I am Risa Engel. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Finalsite, and I also am a former Director of Communications. I was at Stewart Country Day School for 9 years, actually, where I worked with Jen Peck-Nolte. And Morgan, want to
And I'm
introduce
Morgan
yourself?
Delack. I am the Director of Communications here at Finalsite, but before I came on board, I was the Chief Communication Officer for a couple of public school districts, and that is where I met Lesley. So it's really great to be here with everyone today.
And I am Lesley Roberts, and I am a former school psychologist. I'm currently the Assistant Director of Special Education in my school district. But before that, I've been a 504 coordinator, I've been an assistant principal, I've been a department chair. As a school psychologist, though, I worked in early childhood. So I was an early childhood school psychologist. And I also worked at the elementary level as a school psychologist. So I'm happy to be here. I can't believe it's the third year of COVID.
Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Jennifer Peck-Nolte, and I am I work as a school counselor, as a private therapist, as a professor at a couple of universities in New Jersey, and also have been a school administrator. So I recently was the director for a public school district in New Jersey, and have worked in both independent and public schools, so have a real wide lens of that, and have worked in every setting from lower school population, elementary, middle school, and high school. I have done a lot of work around social emotional learning, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and just love this work. And I'm so grateful that you're here, because this is something that I know all of us are passionate about, how to support our students, our communities, and our school leadership. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm currently at Princeton Day School, which is an independent school in Princeton, New Jersey.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Before we dive in, I just wanted to share that if you are on Twitter, we will be tweeting there too. And if you'd like to share any of your takeaways from the session, we would love to see them. And I'm sure your colleagues on the platform would love to hear what you've learned here today as well.
So we wanted to start out this webinar by actually asking you to, knowing that you've taken time today had to put something aside in order to be present with us today. And that is not a small task to do in our current context and in busy lives. So if you would take a moment to just write in the chat, what did you have to leave behind today in order to be present right now? You could just take a moment to just check in with us. Thank you. Editing our school magazine, finalizing COVID testing, lunch with colleagues, cafeteria duty. Wow, thank you so much for taking time to write this. I'm trying to keep up with everything. To see all of these. Preparing info for homecoming.
A website launch.
Yep. Preparing our community tailgate. We'll be talking about community events.
We have a parent who's at home with their 5-year-old.
Oh, wow. Wow. Getting out our fall appeal for the annual fund. Bus misbehavior investigation. Wow. I applaud you for taking the time to be here. Prep time for my next meeting, working through admission marketing, funnel launch, editing weekly newsletters, website updates, COVID reporting, updates to website, cafeteria duty. Thank you so much for sharing so many of these thoughts. And thank you most of all for just being present here with us. We hope that this time that you're with us will be meaningful, informative, and that you can walk away with some ideas that will be beneficial to you.
Thank you so much, Jen. So we would like to thank everybody who submitted questions earlier in the week. We really appreciate it. We did go through those questions as well as some that were submitted earlier and came up with 7 that we thought addressed most of the issues that were asked. So here we go. What are the needs of today's families and how are they different from pre-pandemic times? Lesley, want to get started here with us?
Sure. So our families have a lot of the same needs that they had before. And in addition to that, I think there's an in addition to rather than like a big change completely. Before the pandemic, parents were getting communications from the school district. And now with so much new information coming out, they're getting multiple communications at a rapid pace. They're dealing with lots of meetings, virtual meetings. They're getting new protocols. So they're really being inundated with a lot of information. Also, I would say social connections are different. Families are connecting with people differently. So in some cases, they're missing that social connection altogether. And the way we communicate with families probably needs to be different.
Yeah. Jen, do you want to add in something there?
I mean, just to echo what Lesley said, I think that we need to remember that there's a lot of fatigue and to just be mindful of our families, that we need to, that the communication we're sending out really needs to be mindful of the length and the frequency. And I think that making things brief and concise are something that our families appreciate, as well as just the tools and an easy place to find information, because there's so much of it and so much is coming virtually at them every day. And I also think that there's a need for assurance from school leadership of safety and that there are well-defined protocols. Parents are really wanting to make sure that their children, their families are safe. And that's something that we didn't have to be thinking about as much prior to this, prior to the pandemic that we've lived through, so that we are living through. So, and I think finally, I would say that it is really important to make sure that schools are addressing the mental and emotional wellness of their communities. And we'll talk about that in some slides coming up, but that is a need that has always been present, but it's just risen to the forefront because of what we've been living through. So it is really, really important to be mindful that we don't need to avoid these issues, but rather to handle them and address them in a sensitive way that communicates concern, caring, empathy, while not being overwhelming.
Yeah. Yes, agreed.
So the next question I have for you all is, as communicators, it's difficult to start a district or school communication without really understanding what people are going through. So that's the reason we start with these 2 questions up front, is not only how are the needs different of today's families, but what subgroups or situations should people be really aware of before they say anything as the district or school voice? What are these subgroups, and what do we in this call need to know about them?
Yeah, so they're the obvious subgroups, I think the ones that you hear in the news, but then there are also the subgroups that we don't really think about. We hear that and this has been, widely publicized, that our students of color are going to be more impacted by COVID economically in those ways, our Black and Brown students than their white counterparts. But then there also are students with disabilities, our special education students, and that's top of mind for me just because of what I do. But our students with medical disabilities, that subgroup comes with some complex needs, some complex care needs. Our parents of those students are approaching school with different emotions, even than they did before. Before, they were coming and wanting to make sure their students were educated and were safe, and now there's this added layer of COVID that brings fear. And then we've also got our students who were freshmen last year, but had their freshman year remotely. And so they're coming into the building, and we are catering to our current freshmen, but we also have to remember that our freshmen from last year are technically freshmen as well. So we've got 2 years, two freshman years, two classes of students who have never been in the building before and will need a certain level of attention. What about you, Jen? What do you think?
Yes, to all of that, and just being aware that, I think when we think about the subgroups, we're looking at parents as well, and needing, parents of students of color, and parents of students who are learning challenged, needing to make sure that we're remembering these groups of people as needing, as needing to, us being mindful of their needs. I also wanted to mention too, as Lesley said, there's this whole group of students that never had their freshman year. And then we think about those students who are younger, who are now in first or second grade, who did kindergarten online.
Mm-hmm.
So there are key milestones that we need to be thinking of those and talking with school officials and talking within our communities about being mindful of some of these students really just missing so much that would have been typical in another time. So I think that's something we need to be forefront in our minds.
Yeah, and as we're thinking about them, I think also thinking about the families, right? So the parents of the kindergartners who are starting school for the first time, those parents are starting school for the first time as well. And the freshman parents who are starting high school, that's a huge milestone, like Jen said. So, really thinking about those parents and families who are starting these new things. For us, we do this every day, we do this every year, but our families are doing this for the first time.
And I think maybe also that layer of COVID that we're all dealing with, we forget to remember that this is the first year that somebody's doing something, right? In a normal year, we wouldn't forget that.
That's right.
We would make a big deal.
Yes.
And I'm just going to say one final thought. Keep in mind too, as everyone has already expressed, there are students who, even no matter what grade level they are, spent very little time in their school buildings, and so, and think about parents too, that for some it's difficult, for them to come back. It's difficult for some staff to come back. It's difficult for parents, for students.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a statistic that said that 42% of students of teenagers never attended one of any virtual online class. So we need to really be mindful of many different groups, as Risa said, that in other times we wouldn't necessarily be thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. So this kind of segues, Jen, from your comment into faculty and staff. They're people too, and they're parents too, and they have kids, and so they're going through a lot of these same things that you're talking about, right? So they might be a parent that you need to be more mindful about, but also they need to be teachers, they need to be staffed, they need to be supportive. I'm sure, you know, we've heard the stories and read the articles about faculty burnout. So how can schools motivate them? How can leadership and marketing communications professionals help faculty and staff?
I can answer briefly, and then Lesley, I know, has something really awesome to say as well about this. You know, I heard a nurse in my school district last year say her daughter was a teacher, and she said, my daughter expressed to me that teaching was like waitressing in 2 different restaurants. You know, like having to teach to 2 different platforms. And I'm in a building now where there's equipment to do both of these things, and it's something that has really changed, and it's our staff and our faculty are tired. I would say that it's really, really important to be mindful of, and I know Lesley will talk about this, but, you know, not throwing new stuff on, you know, onto faculty, but rather making time to make things easier. How can we lighten the load? And, you know, one of the very practical ways too is that, you know, I think now one of the benefits, silver linings, is that faculty meetings sometimes can be on Zoom, or you allow faculty to leave and communicate to them that, you know, you're understanding, and they can do their meeting from home, or just making it available and accessible for them to be able to breathe and take a break and pause. So I think about leveraging schools, and we'll talk about this later, but leveraging the community around something positive, like schools, parent-teacher organizations, finding out what can they do to motivate and to help faculty and staff. What are the needs? Finding out what the needs are and finding out how we can really encourage and lift them up, because it's just been so difficult and people are tired, and here they are entering, yet still we're in a period of unknown. Lesley, I know you had some ideas as well.
Yeah, I think well said, Jen. I 100% agree. And I would add, you know, the work is still there. The work to be done doesn't change for schools. But I think a couple things, being really mindful of the new initiatives. There's always a new initiative, and I think teachers get burnt out just on that. You know, this is something new to do, something else to do. And being mindful that the work that we're doing and that we're asking them to do is truly meaningful and that it's connected. Teachers don't mind the work. They don't mind working. That's why they're here. What they don't like is when it's work that doesn't make sense, that is not meaningful, it's not connected, it's yet another thing to add on. But when it's meaningful and connected and leads somewhere, I think, you know, being mindful of that. Another thing is there are things we can do, you know, for teachers that Jen mentioned, as well as just understanding, creating a space to just listen. Sometimes they don't necessarily want you to do something, they just want you to give a little grace. You know, I had one teacher who, you know, the department meeting was at one time and at a specific time, and she had childcare issues that she really could not get around. She really could not get around those childcare issues. So what could I do to accommodate that for her? It was just one time. She's there for every other meeting, but this one time, the time changed, and how can I accommodate that for her? I think that those sorts of things, giving grace, goes a long way.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Lesley. And I was just going to add, I love that, giving grace. I'm just going to add one other thing that, you know, just as we talk about supporting the mental wellness and the of our students, it is really important to take time to recognize that the same needs to be true for faculty and staff, because when we do that for faculty and staff, they're going to be able to support the wellness of students. It's a trickle effect.
Yeah.
So I would strongly encourage using, even in my district last year, we used an in-service day instead of like the more traditional way it's used. It was for a faculty wellness day.
Mhm.
You know, and there were options for people to take part in, and maybe there was, you know, some directive initiatives in the morning for part of the morning, but then there were opportunities for people to go for a walk, for people to engage in a mindfulness. There were staff that led some of these. So I would really encourage staff leaders, those that are communicating with leaders, and those are communicating out to the public, to know that this is something that we're doing to support our faculty and staff as well. We have to walk the walk.
Yes.
If we're going to talk it to the rest of our community. We have to model it ourselves. So I encourage that to take those times. And as Lesley said, to give grace and to find out how can we accommodate.
Yes. And if you say as a district that mental health is important to you, be able to show how you show that it's important to you. Be able to point to those things that you do that shows that mental health is important to you. How do we know?
I love that, Lesley. And as communicators of districts who are communication directors, how do you communicate then to outside to say that we are doing this? Mm-hmm. And this is important and a priority.
I love all that. And, you know, as a former school communicator, I often felt like I was the trusted voice for my colleagues, and I wanted to be that safe person for everyone. So taking your advice, maybe someone on this call might find it valuable to set up even a form that people could fill out to share confidential feedback with the district, or office hours where they could come in and have a confidential conversation. Those are things that I took away from that I could apply to my work as a communicator in a district or a school. Okay, so our next question is one that I think is on a lot of our minds. We all have parents who are still challenging some of our COVID protocols, whether that's at a board meeting, whether it's on social media, it could be phone calls, it could be any number of ways. What are some suggestions that you have, Jen and Lesley, on how we can communicate with people who are still challenging some of these issues?
Yeah, I say communicate with empathy. And, you know, we all have our points of view. That's normal, that's natural, it's human to have your point of view and to have your opinion. But in the end, as professionals, we have to support the board policies. The board policies are what they are, and it's my job and teachers' jobs to support that. And if a parent is struggling with that, I would say to listen and hear what they're saying, allow them to speak their truth. But then in the end, perhaps asking, you know, being honest about this is what the policy is, and your job is, you know, you have to support that policy and it was put in place for a reason. And how can I support you in becoming more comfortable with this policy? You know, what can I do to help you become more comfortable with it? Either way, it could be about a mask or not a mask. You know, what it could be about anything, but how can I help you become more comfortable in this environment to which you belong, to which we all belong?
I love that word, Lesley. That's one of our themes this year where I'm working, is belonging. And I think it's coming from a place of positivity versus having to be contentious. And one of the chat, somebody wrote in the chat, and I agree, you know, somehow we've forgotten how to be kind.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's what Lesley and our work is about, making sure that we remember that. And I think that somehow, again, this all loops back to mental health and wellness, you know, from my professional opinion, that, you know, people have, you know, need to learn how to engage in their own self-care in order to make sure that we are communicating kindness, that we are modeling that to our communities. We can't do that if we're not doing that ourselves. So it's really, I think, a piece of self-reflection. But yes, Lesley, I agree with you completely. It's how do we help people to understand these are the boundaries, but to do it in concise, kind, caring, empathic language.
Yeah.
I love that. Just the belonging. I think some of these issues are really tearing our communities apart. And if they don't agree with the current protocols, parents or students or staff even don't feel like they belong anymore. So bringing them back in and making sure they know you belong here and here's how I'm going to support you. I think that's great, great advice.
That kind of segues into the next question. There's a lot of overlap here, but I also think, you know, we're living in a time where our communities are divided, right? We're kind of on, there's a lot of polarization in our society over many issues. And, you know, some of them have to do with COVID and some of them are not. And we're just kind of living in that time, and COVID is a piece of it. So that being said, people have not really been together for the last 18 months, and now they need to come together, right? And we want them to come together, and maybe we can do something to help heal this divide that's in our world right now. So what would you recommend on how schools could help to bridge a divided community?
It's great to bring people together around a common cause. There are lots of things that divide us, like you said. But there are also a lot of things that unite us. And a lot of those things are built into the school year. You know, there are activities and things throughout the events throughout the school year that kind of bring us all together. And I think focusing on those things and bringing the community together around those things. I mean, coming up, we have homecoming. And there are lots of other things that even at the elementary and the early childhood level that happen, you know, throughout the year, and bringing people together around those things and focusing on what unites us rather than on what divides us.
Yeah. Why are we here? You know, and just as Lesley said, you know, outside my office here, I'm hearing the sounds of student voices. That's why I'm here. And I wanted to say that, you know, that idea of belonging again, as we were talking about, and Morgan had said, at the start of the school year this year, the head of the middle school was doing a parent orientation, and she said, you belong at Princeton Day School. You know, just you belong here. There is a place to the parents. You belong here. And so I think that really rallying around that common cause, like someone said in the chat, prepping for homecoming, you know, these are things, sharing videos from the first week. Faculty love to see that too. Asking for parent involvement in areas that are in need. Parents want to help. Communities want to help. Consider providing a forum for parents. Last year in my district, we did parent academies. This year, parents still are not allowed on campus yet, really. I mean, in terms of in the buildings because of the protocols. But what can we do for parents that can still be supportive? This week we had back to school night, or next week we will. What are those things that can still take place that bring us together? These are just things that happen. Spirit weeks, pizza Fridays, whatever it is, these are the positive things that make us rally around positive, bring us together as a community, attending athletic events, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of those things, especially athletics and other activities right now, while the weather is nice, you can still bring people together outside pretty safely.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, even to host an orchestra dinner, you can do it outside and invite parents to come, you know, bring food, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
All good. I think taking the focus away from some of the things that are divisive and putting them on this kind of thing is, now that we're into the school year, a little bit easier, but still something to be mindful of.
Yeah, I think even, you know, when the weather gets cold, something that helps people feel like they're a part of something is when they see themselves in something. So if there are ways to, you know, highlight people and show people's pictures and, you know, on screens, and if people can point and say, that's me, or I worked on that, you know, I did that, I was a part of that group, where they can see themselves is where they feel a belonging. That's where people start to come together and own it.
Well, that's definitely a communications office function. So 100% we can help with that. See, I'm always a school marketer at heart.
I say the same thing. So yeah, that was a great tip for everyone who's listening. If you were in a communications marketing role, you have the power to validate people by posting their photos, posting their involvement. And I think that's great.
And sharing their stories,
Yes.
right? And inviting them to share their stories. So even if they can't be in the building, you can share their stories and help them to feel a part of the community and have the community get to know them as well.
Yeah, and I'll just end with my final thought on this. Yes, like put it out there on Twitter, on Instagram, you know, people follow this and make sure that, you know, when parents, faculty, when they see themselves, as Lesley said, and say, hey, you know, that it brings people together and it makes people excited and invested with what's happening. Make sure that there's pictures say a lot, and make sure that it's trying to make a community where it shows you belong here. This is important and we want you here and we miss you. That's another thing, you know, in my communications last year as director of counseling, I would say in my newsletters, we miss you. We can't wait to hear you and we can't wait to have you back. We can't wait to see your faces and to do things with you and to be in our theater and to have you be part of our community in terms of a live face-to-face. We can't wait till we can see your smile without a mask. But for now, this is the way it is. So how can we make it see where they see themselves in our places?
Yeah.
This one we touched on slightly in the beginning, but we're sending a lot of communications from all over, from the top level all the way down to the classroom level. From your vantage point, what is the recommended frequency of communications with families when there's perceived or not perceived, there's just burnout? How often should we be sharing information and what should that look like?
I'll be quick on this and say concise, brief, short emails get read. And that should be communicated out all over from whoever is superintendents, heads of school, you know, short emails and affirming emails and encouraging and positive emails. I think that it's also important to communicate when it needs to be something that's longer. We pick up the phone, you know, and we have a live conversation if needed. And then, you know, finally too, and I know Risa will probably maybe speak to this, do you have an area on your website that is like a hub where parents and students and anyone can find information easily? That is so important. No one has time to be going through a maze to figure where my child's homeroom is, or, you know, when the homecoming event is. Make it easy and accessible and pronounced and at the forefront so that people feel like, okay, they understand. Risa, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that last year, most districts and schools had a COVID hub, right? That's where you found all the health and safety information all about COVID, but they didn't necessarily have a communications hub. So the communications hub is not just your safety hub. It's not just your health hub. It's all the information that parents are looking for. Do you have, you know, quick links to all of the emails that your superintendent has put out? Do you have a quick link to your COVID page, even, you know, on your health and safety page? Just really all the information that parents are going to be looking for or that you've sent out already in some other way, you should have them all linked back to that in a central place that parents know they can go to in case they forgot or they can't find something. You shouldn't make people hunt and peck. Mm-hmm. Make it easy for them.
You can also find different ways to communicate. So instead of emails all the time. I love the hub because it allows parents to not to have to read the email right now and be able to go back to know where to find the information when they need it. But also doing videos, presentations or video, what is that? Morgan, help me. When people do it wouldn't be a webinar, but it's
like a live feed of an event or a live stream, something like that.
A live stream. And maybe doing a few more of those, like maybe once a month, the superintendent or an assistant superintendent, will communicate with the community to let them know what's happening. Just an overview of, where we are now and what's happening, instead of just all the emails.
Mm-hmm.
You see some people in the chat have, made reference maybe to their websites or some things that everyone who can look at.
Yeah, we also last year pulled together a hub of our own because we had clients calling us and asking us. So we pulled together a lot of school examples. If you'd like to take a look at finalsight.com/COVID-19.
Nice.
Risa, this one's you.
Oh, so let's see. We've talked about this, and Lesley, Jen, you have reference some of the programs that you've put together at your district. So how would you recommend that communicators and school leaders partner with the mental health teams, with people like yourselves, and the other mental health professionals at their schools and districts?
Right. So can communicators spend time with reach out and I think this is probably not too often done, but could be doing, where we're talking about Lesley's work and Lesley's area of work and mine, where they're actually seeking, let's talk to the mental health professionals and what is happening and how can we support, how can we partner together? Because one of the silver linings, when we talk about silver linings of the pandemic, is that mental health and wellness has risen to the forefront of conversations in schools. And schools that, didn't have programs have more robust programs at this point, or creating programs. I would say that I would use that if I was a communicator in a school. I would use that knowledge to know, to seek out information from these departments in your schools and communicate that information out, because it's something that's on the minds of parents, on the minds of students, on the minds of the community, and make that discourse, heighten that discourse around mental health, and use that information to convey what's going on. What is the district doing around mental health? Are they having a speaker? Is there any parent academies happening? What is happening? It could be even an article. Lesley, would you add anything to that?
That was really great. I guess I would only add for school districts to connect with mental health providers and establish relationships with them, ongoing relationships with them, so that in times of a crisis, if there ever is a crisis or something happens, there's already a relationship. There's already a relationship there.
And I would also,
we had a question come in the chat, just taking a step back a bit about the cadence of communication and what you would recommend with how frequent communication should be coming out from the school.
I mean, when Lesley can speak for her own experience, for if you're talking about in terms of superintendent, heads of school, it varies. I mean, I think in public school district where I was working, the superintendent put something out, usually at least a monthly newsletter. In the independent schools, I see something happen more on a weekly basis, that you can expect something on a weekly basis of communication as to what's happening, and it doesn't need to be long, but it's that touch point. Lesley, do you want to speak for your?
Yeah, I do think it varies. I would say I like the once a month because it's a nice touch point and it's not overkill. But I would also say just be sure that the information that you're putting out, you've brought maybe the admin team together and kind of vetted out, is this everything, you know, instead of sending this communication and then sending another communication because we didn't cover this, you know, making sure that you're covering what you need to cover. And that what goes out is everything that people need to know.
You know, I think that in the time of with COVID outbreaks, and there was so much over communication when schools came back in session last year, and there will be more communication like that that's going to have to go out this year that was not, you know, typically sort of pre-pandemic type of communication. And I think if you can come up with a regular cadence for those, maybe it's once a week where there's an update. Again, you have a dashboard on your communication hub or in your health hub that is updated regularly, like every day, if that information needs to be updated every day. But if you have a push of that information out to remind parents less often, that might be helpful. That way you're not sending out daily emails, you know, reminders, and the people that want to go get it daily can.
I agree completely. I think we need people need to have accessibility to it, and daily would be too much unless something necessary has to come out, but make it easy for people. So as Risa was saying, decide on the cadence, because for me, I know every week I can expect to see something from my son's school. I can just know it's going to the timing, and if I want to find it, there it is.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's a whole new level of information that we're sending out now that was not present before. And that you have to remember that the normal things still need to go out because life goes on, right? We need to make it as normal as possible for the kids, right? And for the parents. But managing to be transparent, share information, but not overload. It's a dance, for sure.
Oops, sorry. So our 8th question and the last question is self-care. We've talked about helping others, but we haven't talked about yet helping ourselves. And often we are the ones feeling the burnout as school leaders, school communicators. How is it that you would recommend that people in these positions take care of themselves when it's unlikely they're going to be able to take a pause and take a day off because there's just so much going on? What are some easy ways that everyone on this call can take care of themselves a little bit better during these times?
Yeah, I think you're right. People just don't want to take a day off because coming back is just so much harder. So, so my supervisor told me that she really encouraged me to block off time in my calendar. And I think to get that from my supervisor was big. For her to give me the okay. Of course, it was something that I would want to do, but to get the okay to do that was big. To block off time in my calendar, and I only do it once a week because that's really all I can afford, where I don't schedule anything and I can't be scheduled. It doesn't mean that I'm not working, but it's I know I'm doing things that I need to do for me. I think in addition to that, you've got to do something every day. So that's kind of professionally, but personally, you know, whatever it is that you do for you, for some people it's prayer once a day. For some people it's meditation once a day. Maybe it's a time of reflection. Whatever that is for you, I say carve out some time in the morning, in the evening, in the middle of the day, whenever that is that works for you, do that thing. I think that the people, and try to make it a habit. And the people who do that tend to be more centered. And on the days that if you find that you make it a habit, the days that you do it, you have more of a repertoire of ways to handle stress than the days you notice if you don't do it, you may not be as centered, things may not go as well. and your decision making is different.
Yep. I concur with you, Lesley, and say that I think that make sure that we walk the walk. We walk the walk as to those in our community. So certainly in our field, we have to try to walk that walk. And I would just recommend, I always heard, make sure that you're stopping, don't get too hungry, halt, angry, lonely, or tired, and definitely don't make decisions when you're in that place. So I'm a big fan of being outside in nature as much as possible. And if it's possible to walk outside during the day, depending upon where you are, or to just, make sure that you are saying, I'm not going to check email during this time. I did post an article from our wellness educator that was sent out this week, where, she's taken, for example, Sundays where she's not looking at any electronic communication. Now, that's not possible probably for some people here, but just devoting some time, making sure you're devoting some time every day for self-care.
I love that halt. Say that again, halt.
Oh, I always say, am I too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Because, when we look at psychology and we look at neuroscience in the brain, as you said, Lesley, we are not able to, we're more in flight and fight. Our amygdala is acting in that manner when we are hungry, angry, lonely, tired. We're going to react instead of act. And so, as you said so well, our decision making is not going to be in the same place as if we take that time to make sure that we're nourishing ourselves, our spirit, and our body. So thank you.
That was my biggest takeaway. So thank you for that. And that was our last question, but we're happy to take questions from anyone here. So if you do have a question, feel free to type it in the chat or the Q&A, and we will have someone, one of Jen or Lesley or both answer it. But as we're waiting for questions to come in, I wanted to share that if you'd like to continue the conversation with everybody here today, we do have a Facebook group we'd invite you to join, and there will be a thread about this session. So if you head to facebook.com/group/school marketing community, we invite you to join the conversation about this using our hashtag mindful communications.
Yeah, and I want to congratulate this group on this, all of you who are participants. I can't see you, but I can see that you're here to say thank you. Thank you for, you are walking the walk, just by being present today and by doing this. And this rejuvenates me as a professional, working with Lesley, Risa, and Morgan. This is what I do and why I do it. So I want to thank you for being there and being participants in this, and say that you can email us or continue the conversation. We're here to lift each other up, and we can't do this alone. I can't do it alone. And we need to be part of a community because that's where I know for me that I get energized. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Thank you so much. And thank you, Morgan and Risa, for putting this together. Thank you, Jen, for being a great partner. And thank you.
We do have one question that just came in. Marina says, are there suggestions on helping a community fractured by COVID feelings to heal? So I think this goes back to our divided community question, if we want to go back to that slide again. Do we want to recap what was said here?
Yeah, I think we talked about bringing the community together around a common cause. So, where do you live, and what are the things that are important, outside of COVID? What were the things that were really important? What were the events that brought people together? Is there a way to highlight those events again and get people involved in those events and kind of refocus the energy to those events, those things that brought people together?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, I don't know what the participant who asked this question, when you say the community that's been affected, in what way particularly, but I just think that we need, acknowledging the story. I'm a big believer that it's important to honor people's stories, but then also to say that our identity is not just COVID. Like, we had an identity prior to COVID. And what is it, as Lesley was saying, that we did that brought our communities together before that? And how can we think about what our communities need now? It's not, we are more than a country that's been devastated by COVID. We are more than a country, that's been devastated by division. We need to focus on what unites us together too. And there's a whole lot, like right now. So thank you. Good question.
Well, thank you to Lesley, to Jen, to Risa for being here today. And thank you to everyone who's participated with us. You can expect the recording to be emailed to you, and also some resources that we've mentioned here will be sent out as well. And we hope to see you in our Facebook group and also on Twitter. So
Thank you.
Really
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Lesley. Appreciate your time, your energy, your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for leveraging this subject. We're so grateful. We'll do it again.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.